About 110 residents of Manchester converged on the Manchester Elementary Middle School gym on Saturday, March 4th, for an informational and floor vote kickoff to Town Meeting 2023. It was the first time since 2020, before the COVID pandemic drove such gatherings largely online and off in person, that residents had gathered for such a town meeting, and the feeling of getting things back to a welcome normal was clearly evident. Once gavelled into session by town moderator Michael Norrath, voters worked their way through discussion and voting on nearly 24 articles on the warning, which took nearly 4 hours to complete. The first item under discussion was the proposed $6.9 million town budget, which prompted several questions from the audience.
I'm very concerned, I know it's difficult to fortify a budget and for it to be effective and realistic. I think Leslie's done a good job in putting that together this year to make it look and seem realistic. But we need to know why we're in this situation, what we're going to do to move forward to take care of that situation. Now, I understand healthcare has gone up. Hopefully Seth and Kathleen can work on that for us up in Montpelier. COVID, I understand all that. You also made a comment, Ivan, on your debate. You mentioned money spent. Can you elaborate on that too, please?
Select Board Chairman Ivan Beatty broke down the budget for voters. It represented an increase from last year's budget of about $6.2 million. With the town currently going through a townwide reappraisal of property values, that meant that while the overall tax rate might decline, the amount of money being paid out by property owners might actually increase, he explained.
Let me back up a little bit and talk, in response to your question, talk a little bit about how we create a budget. There are so many factors going in, but really what it comes down to is we have anticipated expenditures, and that's what we work on the most. We identify non-property tax revenues. And the difference between those two, and non-property tax revenues are up this year, but they're not up to a level that would meet the increase in the expenditures. So expenditures are up, non-property tax revenues are also up, but the gap between those two items is what we ask you for in your property taxes. And that's the part that we really try to keep stable. We look at that number every year. We've been successful over the last many, many years in keeping that at 3% or less, while still offering what is a continuing, growing need for municipal services or a request for municipal services. In my time on the board, which is nearly 40 years, this town has become much more complicated, and what we provide as a municipality has become much more complicated. But getting specifically to your question, Steve, the amount that's going to be raised by taxes, your property taxes this year, my property taxes this year, is $445,000 plus. It represents an 11.36% increase, where typically we've been able to keep it down to 3% and under. That to me is a very difficult message to pass on to you. I think the tax rate will go down. The grand list is going up, is anticipated to go up by 20%. The tax rate is generated by taking what your tax contribution will be, and it's a big number. It's 3 million plus, and then dividing that by the grand list, and that creates, you divide the dollar amount by the grand list amount, and it gives you the factor, the tax rate that you would apply to your assessment in order to generate that money for the municipality. If the grand list goes up, you're dividing by a bigger number, the tax rate goes down, but don't be fooled by that. Because your assessment, most likely, if you're like most people in the community, is going to go up. So that's going to be offset by a more value in your home or your property. So when I say the tax rate will go down, it's going to go down by 6%, but your taxes are going to go up by some amount. And you'll see some of those. There are charts in the handbook that show what the effect of certain parts of municipal government, the effect that they will have on your actual dollars that you're spending. And those numbers relate to a $275,000 home, which I'm not sure we have many of those left after the reappraisal, but that was considered to be a somewhat average or moderate home. So if your home stayed at $275,000, if it started at $275,000, did not go up in the reappraisal, your municipal taxes will go down. But if your appraisal went up, your taxes will go up by that amount minus 6%.
Another article which generated much discussion was an advisory question which asked the town select board to consider chipping in up to $95,000 towards a proposed pedestrian bridge over the west branch of the Battenkill, which would connect Main Street to the town green. Referred to as the Riverwalk Bridge, the total cost was reckoned to run about $800,000, the bulk of that raised from private sources. Some residents saw it as a community asset that would enhance the town. Others questioned why town money, even if drawn from non-property tax sources, should be expended on that when there were other needs to be met. A paper ballot was eventually called for, and when all the votes were counted, the article passed by a 65 to 35 vote margin. Steve Drunzik, a member of the Riverwalk Committee which had advanced the proposal, said he was pleased with the outcome.
To be honest, it was a little bit more controversial than I thought it would be. There were some surprises in terms of some of the speakers that got up to speak against it, but all in all, I think it was 65 to 35, so I think that's a fairly comfortable margin, which would indicate that we have substantial majority support for this project.
So what are the next steps then? This is an advisory vote, so it doesn't compel the select board, right, to appropriate the $95,000 you're looking for.
Correct. So now it's in there, the ball's in their court, and it'll be interesting to see how long they choose to sit on it or whether they take immediate action. I think they're going to have to assess where these funds might come from, and keep in mind that we've given them flexibility to spend up to $95 or allocate up to $95,000. So I anticipate that we may see some number substantially smaller than that, but I really can't get into their heads. I don't know how this is going to play out, but we will be following this closely.
Voters approved all the other monetary requests on the warning that were decided by floor votes. On Tuesday, March 7th, voters decided by Australian ballot to approve $87,000 for the Northshire Day School and $243,740 in operating support for the Manchester Community Library. Ivan Beatty, the long-term Select Board chairman, also won re-election to a 3-year seat on the Select Board after being challenged by Megan Amundsen, a member of the town's Planning Commission. Cynthia Kilburn, a Justice of the Peace and a member of the town's Board of Civil Authority, summed it up.
It's absolutely great, and I'm hoping next year we double the number of people attending. We had a huge snowstorm overnight that probably slowed a few people down, but we still had 110 people here. Fantastic. Loved having an in-person meeting.
Much better than Zoom, huh?
Much better than Zoom.
For the GNAT-TV News Project, I'm Andrew McKeever.